Welcome back to Sunrise. The government's new reforms for hate speech and guns have passed Parliament with a late deal struck between Labor and the Liberals to get the legislation targeting hate groups through the Senate. It saw the coalition divided in the upper house, with 3 National senators in shadow cabinet defying the position taken by opposition leader Susan Lee. For their take, let's bring in Employment Minister Amanda Rishworth and National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie. Good morning to both of you. Amanda, the Prime Minister admitted for the very first time yesterday radical Islamic extremism is a major problem in this country. It is the first time in the 37 days after the attack at Bondi he used that phrase. Why has it taken so long?
Well, I think we have been incredibly consistent when it comes to working out how we address what is hate in this country, anti-Semitism in this country, and how we address it. And of course, the legislation, the hate legislation against hate speech in this country looks at how we tackle some of these issues, including cancelling visas or stopping people coming to the country that are seeking to divide us and spread hate. So this has been important legislation that we have had to get through the Parliament. It was disappointing we didn't see the Parliament come together completely, but I am pleased it's passed the Parliament and has been important action to tackle hate speech and anti-Semitism in this country.
Amanda, though, was there a reason that the Prime Minister and the government wasn't using that term, radical Islamic extremism, before now?
I think the Prime Minister has been quite clear that radical extremism, particularly when it comes to Islamic radical extremism, is a perversion of Islam. I think he has been very clear about that and very clear that this was a terrorist attack, that this was an anti-Semitic terrorist attack. It was an attack on Jewish Australians, but when it's an attack on Jewish Australians, it's an attack on all of us. I think he has been quite clear, and the laws, and importantly, the action that the Parliament has now taken looks at how the motivation of the terrorists, and it looks to address that, along with the method through access to guns by people that shouldn't have them.
OK, Bridget, you've actually called the new hate speech laws gutless. Why?
Well, we've seen a gutless Prime Minister from day one on the actions of radical Islam extremism, which is now in our suburbs. Nat, you and I have spoken about this more often than the Prime Minister has talked about it since October the 7th, 2023. They are the facts. And to hear Amanda rewrite history in the face of the worst terrorist attack our country has seen galls me as a Zionist and as a friend of Australian Jews. He could have actually assisted Australian Jewish community to help pay for the armed guards that are today, yesterday, last year, the year before, standing out front of kindergartens, primary schools, secondary colleges, so that young Jewish people in this country can go to school. He didn't. On any measure, this Prime Minister has not stood with the Jewish community. He can't say anti-Semitism without saying Islamophobia for 2.5 years. And we've had a big song and dance to bring back the Parliament, which should have been brought back earlier, to pay our condolences and respects to the dead in the face of this tragedy. Those are the actions he could have been taking for 2.5 years without a terrorist attack and without having to play politics, which is what he's had done. Now, the National Party, very glad about the migration changes in this legislation bill that are going to see hate preachers off our suburban streets, on planes, and get out of here. And I commend the government and the Liberal Party for coming to an agreement on this, and I urge Tony Burke to not be shy about using these powers, because what we've seen over the last 2.5 years, Nat, is our existing powers for state governments and federally that haven't been used that has led us to this tragedy in December. OK, let's move on. We've got an update on the backlash surrounding MP family travel entitlements. This was huge last year and people want answers. Under new rules handed down by an independent tribunal, family members of MPs will no longer be allowed to fly business. They'll only be allowed one family reunion trip outside of Canberra per year.
Well, the spouses of senior MPs will be allowed 3 additional trips per year to attend portfolio-related events, which, you would expect to be a lot of things. Amanda, do you think this passes the pub test?
Well, firstly, I would say that the Prime Minister asked for the existing rules that have been in place over successive governments to be looked at by the Remuneration Tribunal. They've had a good look at it and made these recommendations, which reduces and limits family travel. I think that is important, and we accept in principle those recommendations. So, look, I think this is an important step to build confidence, and I think, of course, we accept in principle the recommendations from the Remuneration Tribunal.
Bridget, what do you think? So there's basically 4 trips that family members can make, and they're not business, they're economy. Is that still too much, or is that okay?
Well, I think that's fair enough. Having been a minister like Amanda is now, with children still at school, you are away for 2/3 of the year from your family home, and I would often fly, my school-age child up here if I had to work over the weekends in Canberra. So I know that ministers working on portfolio issues do have to be around the country and may be away for a long time. And if your kid's struggling or whatever, needs to see their mum or their dad, that is appropriate. It is also appropriate to fly economy. And I think that most Australians would find that reasonable.
Yeah, that seemed to be the strong recommendation from the public. Well, while we've got you, the thing that has got Australia and the world talking is this spate of shark attacks in New South Wales. 4 attacks in 48 hours. Amanda, your home state of South Australia has seen its fair share of attacks. Tony Abbott says we need a cull. What do you make of that?
Well, firstly, I would say the recent, I think there's been 4 attacks in Sydney are absolutely shocking and devastating for communities and bystanders and first responders. It is a very traumatic experience. Look, I don't pretend to be an expert in how to mitigate these shark attacks. People need to feel safe in the water. Of course, I'm sure state authorities are working towards that. But one thing I would do as an immediate action is encourage people to listen to the lifesavers, to observe the signs. When it says shark sighting, don't go into the water.
Bridget, do we need a cull? Would you support Tony Abbott in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in sharks, but they are an apex predator of the sea, and they like to eat seals and anything that looks like a seal. And unfortunately and tragically, an 11-year-old boy has lost his life. So I'm not going to prioritise the life of a shark over the life of an Australian child. And so I think most reasonable people would say a shark cull is the very least we could do. There's been changes to fishing regulations that I've heard have also seen a rise in particularly those larger sharks. As I understand it, they have a territory within the waters that they see as their own, the larger they get. And so we need to understand that humans and sharks don't mix. I raise my kids on a beach, they're better for it, and I think it's part of our iconic Aussie way of life, and we need to protect it.
Yeah, and just clarifying, that young boy is not expected to survive, but that is the update we have at the moment. Thank you both. We'll see you next week. Here's David.